Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Supporting People with Down Syndrome and Living a Healthy Lifestyle, which is presented by the Adult Down Syndrome Center. My name is Laura Chicoine, and I'm the Project Manager for Research and Education. And I'm presenting today with Dr. Katie Frank, who is the occupational therapist at the center. Before we get started, I'm going to go through a few quick reminders. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available within 2 weeks in our resource library. We'll also send an email to attendees with the link to the recording. And then we are going to have a Q&A today, and please submit questions using the Q&A option through Zoom, and feel welcome to submit those throughout the presentation, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can at the end. And as I mentioned, this webinar is presented by the Adult Down Syndrome Center, and we are a healthcare clinic for adolescents and adults with Down syndrome in Park Ridge, Illinois, and that's a suburb of Chicago. And we were started in 1992, and since then we have seen over 6,000 adolescents and adults with Down syndrome. And then lastly, just a quick disclaimer that this webinar is intended for educational purposes only and is not intended to be medical advice. And we recommend that you bring any questions you have about a specific situation with your loved one to your healthcare provider or another healthcare professional. So as I mentioned, today's webinar is about supporting individuals with Down syndrome in making healthy lifestyle choices. And so we're going to go through and explain why it's important for individuals with Down syndrome to learn how to live a healthy lifestyle, and then identify what skills specifically need to be learned. And then lastly, describe how we as family members, caregivers, support staff, or other professionals can support individuals with Down syndrome in living a healthy lifestyle. And I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Frank.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. So the first thing we're going to start with is talking about why it is important for individuals with Down syndrome to learn how to live a healthy lifestyle. And really, it's because it helps to maintain good health overall. And here at the ADSC, we believe there are 3 aspects, which include physical, mental, and social health. And if you've ever been part of any of our webinars, you've heard Dr. Chicoine talk about that. But it's also important because it helps with safety, and it could be safety around making good choices, could be following nutritional needs, maybe if they have celiac disease or some other intolerance, but it can also be safety to make sure that they have appropriate behaviors. It's also important because it can help individuals achieve goals, and goals are going to vary from individual to individual, whether it's weight loss or getting a job. It really depends. But when we have good health, it can help us achieve our goals. And then it can also help with greater independence. And we understand that there's a spectrum of independence and that it can vary from individual to individual, but everyone should have the opportunity to be able to be as independent as possible with many of these skills. And so learning the skills that we're going to talk about today can help lead to that. And then overall, we really want to find this balance between safety and independence. And so what skills need to be learned? We're going to focus on this generally, but really go into it more specifically when we talk about the how. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list, but this is a list of topics that we typically address in our social skills groups and when we work with individuals with Down syndrome here at the center. And when you look at this list, hopefully you see that these are things that all of us need to work on. It's not just unique to individuals with Down syndrome. And we like to stress that when we do the groups, that they're not learning these skills because they have Down syndrome, they're just learning them because they have the opportunity to, and that everyone should be practicing these skills. And so some of the topics are eating a healthy diet, drinking enough water, being physically active, getting good sleep, managing stress and emotions, completing self-care tasks, and using appropriate social skills. So how can we help? And basically the rest of this presentation is about the how. And so we're going to give you skills that you can use to address each topic. But before that, we really have to emphasize that how we help the individual depends on so many things about the individual. If you've met one person with Down syndrome, guess what? You've only met one person with Down syndrome. Down syndrome is just one piece of who each of them is. And so they have their own preferences and abilities. And so it might be that they have specific nutritional choices or different food preferences or just sensory preferences that impact how we address some of these skills. They have personal choice for activities. And so some things that we suggest they're not going to want to do, but they might have other activities that they like. We also know that individuals with Down syndrome have strengths and areas of growth, just like the rest of us. So that is going to impact how we address each of these topics. Same with motivating factors and goals. One person may have a goal for weight loss, where another one wants to drink less soda and drink more water. Or maybe someone really needs to work on how they express their emotions, or they want to work on their healthy relationship skills. Whatever it might be, we have to find what's motivating for them and utilize that to help teach them. It could really also depend on the living situation. So whether or not they're living in a family home or if they're in a group home or residential setting, because that can impact really how we teach them. And then we all have a preferred learning style. So some of us learn best through what we see. Some of us learn best through what we hear. Others need to practice and actually get their hands on it and experiment. And some people might have a preferred learning style of visual, but then a secondary learning style of auditory. And so we do know how most individuals with Down syndrome learn best, but it is important to consider that learning style when we're teaching some of these topics. So like we said, we know what works for most. Even though every person with Down syndrome is an individual, there are some commonalities, and we see that regularly here at the Adult Down Syndrome Center. So most people with Down syndrome are visual learners. They just process what they see faster than what they hear. And so visuals and videos tend to work for most. We also know that they imitate others, especially things they see in TV shows and videos and movies. And so modeling is really important. And that's a good way to teach some of these skills. We also know that just like they learned any skill, whether it's toileting or getting dressed, repetition and practice is really important. Having a good social circle to teach and provide guidance is helpful. And then we know that being as concrete as possible is best, because gray areas are really challenging for individuals with Down syndrome, and they need things to be as black and white as possible. We also know that establishing a routine can be really helpful. Although, you've probably also heard it called the groove, but the groove is great until it isn't. So sometimes routine can actually get us in trouble when we need to build in flexibility, which is also hard because that's also very abstract. So we're going to be talking about that. But I'm going to pass it over to Laura now, and we're going to go into detail with each of the topics that we've identified earlier.
Thank you, Katie. So our first topic is healthy eating. And just as a quick disclaimer, Katie and I are not dietitians or nutritionists. So what we're sharing is not recommendations from a dietitian or nutritionist. We're sharing information that works for most, like Katie has said. And so if you do have specific questions, we recommend working with a health professional. And then again, we aren't physicians either, so we won't be talking about supplements or vitamins. What we will be talking about are some common challenges that we see with healthy eating. One is the inability to feel full and struggling with portion control, and that can often lead to overeating. So maybe an individual has a hard time knowing when to stop. They just continue to eat because they never feel that sense of satiation or fullness. We also tend to see a preference for foods that aren't as healthy as others. So things like fried foods or carbs. And this isn't unique to people with Down syndrome. We certainly all have times where we crave something salty or sweet that might not be on the healthiest end of the spectrum of foods. Picky eating can also be a challenge, and this is often related to sensory. So individuals might avoid foods with certain textures, or if there are certain foods that are more challenging to eat, that can tend to lead people away from certain foods. So for example, if eating a particular type of meat is difficult because it just takes a lot of effort with chewing, then an individual might not want to eat that meat. And that could be construed as picky eating. And then, like Katie said, abstract concepts are difficult. And healthy eating is one of those abstract concepts. What is healthy? That can vary based on what advice you hear or what particular food you're eating. So for example, with salads, a salad with bacon and fried chicken and a lot of dressing is very different than a salad with kale and spinach and mostly vegetables and a vinaigrette dressing. So there's variation within food types that can make knowing what is healthy more challenging. And also, you can make changes to certain foods that might seem healthy that then make them a little bit less healthy. So for example, an apple is a fruit, but a caramel apple is very different than a plain apple. Or fried cauliflower, that's very different than raw or steamed cauliflower. So those are some of the things that make healthy eating more challenging. And again, this is a difficult concept for everyone, not just individuals with Down syndrome. So some of the strategies are helping individuals with Down syndrome identify what healthy choices are. And so trying to break that abstract concept down into more concrete pieces. So sometimes we'll start with simple tips. Maybe choose grilled food instead of fried food. And especially if you're eating out at a restaurant and you can tell on the menu what's grilled versus fried. Or simple tips like fill half your plate with fruits and veggies. That can help with knowing how much of each type of food you should eat. And then drinking water instead of sweetened beverages. You can very quickly cut down on the amount of sugar you're consuming if you're having water instead of a pop or a sugary lemonade. And then also identifying healthy choices. Another strategy to identify healthy choices is the stoplight method. And you can find a lot of examples of this online. We just pulled 2 examples here and have provided the links. So when we share the slides, you can click on those links to read more. But the idea behind the stoplight method is that there are red foods that we rarely eat. Those are those special choices or special treats. And then we have yellow light foods that are foods that we sometimes eat. And then green light foods that we can eat daily, pretty much all the time. And the stoplight tends to be a little bit more effective than eliminating entire food groups or identifying foods as good or bad. And Joan Medlin, who wrote the book, the Down Syndrome Nutrition Handbook, has talked about this, where when we make something forbidden, that makes us want it even more. So putting it in terms of this is something we don't eat all the time, but we can still have every once in a while is a little bit easier than saying you can never have it. And what's nice about the stoplight method is that you can create your own stoplight plan based on the needs of the particular individual. So for someone who's gluten-free, foods with gluten wouldn't even be on the stoplight. But for someone who isn't gluten-free, that could be in either the green, the yellow, or the red light part of the stoplight. And then also you can set different goals around the stoplight. So maybe initially, yellow light foods are things that you eat only once a day, but then yellow light foods could move to something you only have 3 times a week to 2 times a week, because certain goals are too big to bite off right at the beginning. And so setting more realistic goals can help with the sustainability of the plan. Availability of healthy food also plays a big role in how successful an individual is in making healthy choices. So a general recommendation would be to keep mostly healthy options, those green light foods in the house, and have fewer of those yellow light foods. And maybe not even keep red light foods in the house. Those are only for special occasions. This often means that the entire household has to commit to this healthy eating plan, but that can really be a good thing because then there's that social support within the family. Everyone's participating in the plan. It's not just the individual with Down syndrome who is making the changes. And then it can also be helpful to look for alternatives to favorite foods that maybe fall in those yellow or red categories, or will allow an individual to have a healthier diet. So maybe someone really loves carbs, and so they're the pasta, the bread, and that's all they want to eat. So maybe substituting zucchini noodles for spaghetti, or having lettuce wraps instead of bread to try and get some of those vegetables into the diet. Cauliflower is also something that can be used in many ways. So you can make cauliflower mashed potatoes or pizza crust or rice. And a lot of that can be purchased in the frozen section. I know that when time is crunched, I'm not wanting to mash up cauliflower. I tend to go for what's available in the frozen section of the grocery store. And then labeling foods can also help an individual be more independent in making these healthy choices. So if you have, you could buy those stickers there pictured on the screen with red, yellow, and green dots, and maybe put a green dot on the vegetable crisper in the refrigerator or on the bowl of fruit that's kept on the counter. And then use the red and yellow dots on different foods in the house. And that way the individual knows, oh, I've already had a yellow food today. I shouldn't take that box off of the shelf because it's a yellow food. Or I can always have green light foods, and that vegetable drawer is labeled with a green dot. So that puts more of the control in the hands of the individual. And then involving the person in shopping for and preparing foods not only helps with independence, but also helps them feel more control over the process. So maybe together you work on creating a weekly menu, or you have the individual with Down syndrome take half of the grocery list in the grocery store and find those items, and then you meet back up. And maybe trying new foods is a goal. Perhaps then give the individual a choice and say, this week we're going to try a new vegetable. Do you want to try cauliflower or broccoli, or cauliflower or carrots? Something similar to that. And then for portion control and satiation, using pre-portioned snacks is a good way to avoid overeating. And they can certainly be bought in the grocery stores. That tends to be more expensive. So if you want to just buy the larger container, then you can put snacks into baggies, or even just take a portion and then put the bag away. I know that if I take that bag of chips with me to the couch, I'm going to eat far more chips than if I had just put some into a bowl, put the bag of chips back into the pantry, and then went to the couch or to the table. And using measuring cups can help with teaching individuals with Down syndrome about portion sizes. Many of us have a distorted sense of what a healthy portion size is. And so using those measuring cups to know what exactly is a cup, what exactly is half a cup of certain foods can be helpful. Serving food in stages is also another strategy. And we actually learned this one from a family. So these are strategies that we have heard be successful. So maybe you start with the vegetables and fruit first and fill up on that, and then serve the protein second and the grains third. That system worked for that particular family because carbs were something that the individual really enjoyed. So they were fuller because they had had the vegetables and protein first, and they were less likely to eat too many carbs or grains. And then with seconds, that's something that can be a challenge. Some individuals always want seconds, and that's just become part of the routine. And if that's a routine that a groove that isn't something that's going to be broken, then maybe start with a smaller serving of food And that way, when the individual gets seconds, it just adds up to one serving. Or maybe choose foods that you can have seconds of. So you can always have seconds of vegetables, but not the pasta or not the desired food, another desired food. Or to give an individual time to digest their food, you could set a goal to wait until everyone is done with their first plate before going to get seconds. And that way, it slows down the pace of eating and allows the body time to know if it's full or not. The last strategy is a weekly dessert or treat allotment. And this can help the individual take more control over their sweets intake. So one family had set up a system where there was a basket, and each week the individual's desserts were in that basket for the whole week. And so the person could have all of the desserts on Monday, but that meant that that individual did not get any desserts the rest of the week because those desserts were gone. And that encouraged the individual to know, well, if I eat it all today, I won't have any the rest of the week. So that way I'll pace myself so that I can have desserts throughout the week. Using a calendar is also another option for that. You can mark what days you can have dessert, or mark off when you've had a dessert that day. Some other strategies for portion control are serving food from the counter or the stove, rather than putting the food on the table. It just adds that extra step of having to get up and go to the counter or stove to get seconds. And that really can be helpful if you're trying to avoid having second helpings of food. And then another way to encourage a slower pace of eating can be seen, in the visual at the bottom of the slide, where you take a bite, you put the fork down, and then you chew the food 5 to 10 times, swallow, and then maybe take a sip of water, and then pick up your fork again. It does take time for our bodies to know when we're full, so that slowing down the pace of eating can help with that. Using smaller plates or a portion plate, like you can see in the picture there, or a divided plate can help with knowing how much of certain types of foods we should be eating. So the portion plate there shows that half of our plate should be fruits and veggies, a fourth of our plate should be protein, and then a fourth of our plate should be grains. And that's a really nice visual for individuals to know how much of certain types of foods to eat. And then lastly, when dining out, the portions tend to be quite large, so maybe splitting a meal with another family member or bringing home leftovers. And what tends to work best is to ask for a box right when your food comes and to split the meal in half and put it in the box so it's out of sight, out of mind. And then you're just focused on the food that's on your plate. And we have a number of resources in our resource library, and I put the link to our resource library in the chat. So please feel free to check that out. But one is a video on setting a healthy pace for eating. And Julia talks about some of those strategies we were discussing with putting your fork down, making sure to chew fully, taking a sip of water. And then we also have some healthy snack ideas, and then a whole series of videos on the different food groups. And it's based on the portion plate. So talking about filling half your plate with fruits and veggies, a quarter of your plate with protein, and a quarter of your plate with grains. And then we also have some simple tips like we were talking about earlier, and that handout is linked there as well. But that's just some of them, so please feel free to check out all of our resources on healthy eating. Our next topic is hydration. And the providers at the Adult Down Syndrome Center find that dehydration is common for many people with Down syndrome who come to our clinic. So that inadequate fluid intake can really be a challenge. Individuals with Down syndrome tend to just not get enough food from drinking or from their food. I meant to say don't get enough fluid from drinking or from their food. And then some of the things that make getting enough fluid difficult are that some people don't like the taste of plain water. It's just too bland. And then another is a preference for pop or soda, and they don't hydrate as well as water, and they also contain that sugar and those calories, which water does not have. So some of the strategies to address that are to create a schedule or a calendar or some other visual to help the individual know how much water to drink each day. This is just one example that we pulled from the internet. If you search for water tracker, there are many different types of water trackers out there. And it shows 8 cups. And so every time you drink a cup, you can make an X on that calendar. And that can really have a sense of accomplishment. Every time you check it off, it's one less cup that you have to drink. Choosing a container to drink out of can also be a helpful strategy. Some people really prefer to drink out of a straw. So getting one of those cups with a plastic straw can be really helpful. Or some people prefer water bottles. That just helps them drink more. There are also containers that have the amount of water that you should drink each day marked out. They even divide it by the time of day. There are all sorts of different cups and bottles that you can look into, and that also helps the individual have more choice in it, because if they get to choose the container, then they know what they can use to make sure they reach their goal. In terms of taste, certainly there's flavoring with fruit or trying carbonated water. This is all, again, advice that people get who have and don't have Down syndrome. Then we're also often asked about those low calorie packets like Crystal Light or something similar. They're not as good as plain water, right? Because they have those artificial sweeteners, but they also don't have the calories and sugar that regular pop or juice have. So maybe that's a bridge to help someone get from drinking those full sugar drinks to drinking plain water or water that's just flavored with fruit. And then perhaps with pop and soda, setting a goal around that, like saying you have to have 4 glasses of water for every pop that you have, so that you're balancing out the amount of pop that you're drinking, or having a visual reminder. Maybe you can only have 1 pop per day, or you can have 1 pop per week. And once that pop is crossed off on that visual, then you know that you're done for the week. And again, we have some resources in our resource library. We have a video on keeping hydrated, as well as a handout that corresponds to that. And Julia, again, in this video, talks about the importance of hydration. And then we have some alternatives to pop and soda, and just a short handout on staying hydrated. Our next topic is physical activity. And so some of the common challenges around getting enough physical activity are some of the physical limitations that individuals with Down syndrome have. Low muscle tone and joint laxity are more common in people with Down syndrome, and it makes it physically difficult to move. Actually, Dr. Frank gives the example of when you sit in one of those big cushy chairs that you just sink into. And then when you're trying to get up, it really takes a lot of effort to get out of that chair. And that can be the amount of effort that some individuals with Down syndrome have to exert for common tasks that you or I might not have to. So that can make being physically active more challenging. And then when you add on top of it that there is a higher rate of obesity in individuals with Down syndrome, it makes exercise even harder. There's just more weight to carry. And then many people with Down syndrome have a lower level of endurance. Not all, but many do. And there is a researcher in Utah, Dr. Tessa Hilgenkamp, who has really been studying this a lot. And we have some links to her articles on our resource library. And actually, she's in Nevada, not Utah. Excuse me. Time can also be another challenge with getting physical activity in. And this is true for all of us. If we're so overscheduled, it's hard to fit physical activity into our day. And sometimes individuals don't have the opportunity. So maybe they like to go to the gym, but because of COVID, the gym has been closed. Or they can't get a ride to the gym, so they unfortunately can't go to the gym that day. COVID has also just resulted in fewer recreational opportunities in general. So some of the parts of the day where we get regular activity aren't there anymore. When we're working from home, we're not walking from the parking lot into the building or things like that. And then there are some people who just don't enjoy physical activity. So that can be a challenge to getting enough activity into the day. Sometimes equipment can be an issue as well. An individual might not know how to use the equipment or doesn't want to use the equipment without supervision. So that can make getting physical activity a little bit more challenging. And like I started to mention with COVID, aging out of school can be a challenge because some of those natural opportunities for physical activity within the day aren't there anymore. So walking from class to class or going to the lunchroom, that is no longer a part of the daily schedule. So you're going to see some themes in the suggestions that we have, but building physical activity into the schedule or into the calendar can help hold not only the individual with Down syndrome, but also the family accountable. If at 3 p.m. it's time to do Zumba, then we have to make sure that we account for that in the day's activities. If time is an issue, breaking up physical activity throughout the day can be helpful. When we do our healthy lifestyle workshop with individuals with Down syndrome, we talk about commercial breaks and how those are great times to get up off the couch, maybe do some arm circles or some jumping jacks, do some squats, just getting that physical activity in during times that we might not normally. And I know with Netflix, we also talk about how maybe it has to be between episodes or every 10 minutes, set a timer so that you know to get up and move a little bit. And then there are also a lot of at-home options, and those take out the need for transportation. That can be an issue, or some of the remove some of the challenges that COVID has put into place. So there are videos. Dancing is always a great one. All you need is some music. Even chores, vacuuming, wiping down the table, doing laundry. That is movement. That's good to incorporate into the day. And then making it social, and this is helpful for all of us. Maybe right now it has to be through Zoom, but that helps with accountability. It makes it more fun, or involving the whole family. So maybe instead of going to see a movie one Saturday afternoon, going for a walk or going for a hike, changing up the family activities a little bit to make it more physical. And then rewards can also be a helpful way to do physical activity. Some people get a little mark in an app every time they go to the gym. That can be really rewarding to see, oh gosh, I went to the gym 3 times this week, or I went to the gym 10 times this month. It can also be stickers. It doesn't have to be an app. It could be every time I exercised this week, I get to put a sticker on my calendar. And seeing those stickers can be very rewarding. New exercise clothes maybe, or tablet time could be a reward for adding in physical activity. And we do have resources on physical activity in our resource library. We have that Ways to Be Active handout. This alphabet workout is another fun way to get exercise in. You can pick your name or any word or phrase, and it gives you different exercises that you can do for each letter of that word or phrase. And Special Olympics is great for in-person activities as well as things that they have online. They have their School of Strength, which they started during COVID, and that has several exercise videos. And then they also have a program called Fit 5. And in addition to exercises, it also talks about healthy eating, hydration, stress management, and sleep. And speaking of sleep, I'm going to actually turn it over to Dr. Frank, and she is going to talk about our next topic.
All right, thank you, Laura. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A. We will have time at the end of the presentation to get those questions answered. And so if it's easier to do it while you're thinking of it, please feel free. There are some common sleep issues that we frequently hear about here at the Adult Down Syndrome Center. And We have seen some of these challenges during the pandemic, especially because there was really no reason to get up and moving during the day with activities and schools being closed. So we saw people going to bed too late. Maybe they were sleeping all day. Perhaps they were reversing their sleep and wake cycles. So they were sleeping during the day and staying up all night. We also know that some individuals like to stay up at night because that's the time when the house is quiet and no one's bothering them and they can find some alone time. Other individuals don't like to go to bed until everyone else in the house is asleep. And that's because, the fear of missing out, right? They want to be involved in what everyone else is involved in. Some are unable to fall asleep without somebody nearby, or they wake up in the middle of the night and maybe go into the parents' room because they need help falling back asleep. And then obviously sleep apnea, we know that that's a common challenge and something that's pretty prevalent in individuals with Down syndrome, but we are not going to talk specifically about sleep apnea today. There is a webinar that we have referenced in this presentation from August of 2020, where Dr. Chicoine and I share strategies to help with sleep and sleep apnea. And so we would like to refer you to that just because there's not going to be enough time to also address sleep apnea on top of all the other challenges. So this is an example of a handout we give out because we find that it's really important to establish a sleep routine. And again, this is important for all of us. But in order to have good sleep, we all should go to bed around the same time every night. Doesn't matter if it's a weeknight or a weekend. And we should also wake up at the same time every morning. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a Saturday or a Tuesday. And obviously it's recommended that we try to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. So we put that as part of our sleep routine. And it's important to make a good sleep space. And so what that means is that we shouldn't be watching TV in our room before bed. We shouldn't be on our tablet before bed, and we shouldn't be using our phone before bed. And again, I know I do most of those things, and I'm sure many of you do too. But it's important that if we do any of that, it shouldn't be while we're in bed. We need to make sure that where we sleep is designated just for sleep. And that's also been another challenge during COVID because individuals are probably going to school or doing some of their day program activities in their bedroom, right? And so then their bedroom isn't just a place for them to sleep, it's also a place for them to work. And then it's important to have a healthy bedtime routine. And that could be a hygiene routine. It could be a relaxation routine. It could be a combination of both of them, but having something that is pretty regimented each night is going to help someone's body prepare for sleep. And so one way to establish a sleep routine is to use visual supports and schedules. Again, it might be that schedule of that routine. It could just be a visual support reminder that maybe they need to use the restroom before they go to sleep. Whatever that might be, it's going to be helpful. You can also set alarms. So we find that if you set an alarm to remind them that it's time to turn off the TV, or it's time to start that bedtime routine, or they're done with their relaxation routine, whether it's reading a book or whatever, and it's time to go to bed. We also encourage individuals to wake up on their own in the morning with an alarm. And again, a lot of them might not like that blaring sound of an alarm. So there's a variety of alternatives for waking up. And again, you'll find that in the sleep presentation back from August of 2020. You can include choice in the bedtime routine. So it might be you have to brush your teeth and get on your pajamas. Which one do you want to do first? And maybe it changes from day to day, and that's okay as long as it gets done. Or they get to choose whatever relaxation strategy that they want that night. Or even when they were younger, you probably had them, if you read books before bed, you gave them a choice. Do you want to read this book or this book? So it's important to include choice. It's going to help with independence. A lot of our individuals don't get very many choices throughout the day. So whenever we can build that in, it's going to help them learn that they do have choice and that they can make decisions for themselves. We also find that individuals may linger in bed in the morning because they don't really know what to do once they wake up. So you can create a morning routine to avoid that visual support to serve as a reminder. Or if there's something really motivating the next morning, you tell them, remember, when you wake up in the morning, we have to get dressed because it's time for whatever it is that's very exciting and motivating for them. So those can all help establish a sleep routine. And Laura was sharing some examples of other resources. So here are some of examples of our sleep resources. So like I mentioned, we have the sleep webinar from August. We have resources on ways to get good sleep and addressing challenges with falling or staying asleep. We have a video starring 2 individuals with Down syndrome talking about how to use a CPAP machine and clean it and take care of it and wear it at night. That can be really helpful for individuals that don't tolerate wearing a CPAP. But all of our resources on sleep can be accessed via this link. So now we're going to talk about stress and emotions. And some of the common challenges for individuals with Down syndrome are identifying stress and emotions, or effectively communicating about their emotions and healthy ways of managing it. And we do know that individuals with Down syndrome experience stress, but just how it presents may be different. So we might see a change in behavior. Maybe we see an increase in self-talk or more social isolation, or maybe they have an increase in behaviors of hitting or yelling, or they want to sleep more. Whatever it might be, we do know that individuals experience stress, but how they communicate it is something that they need to learn. So we have a whole group on managing stress and emotions. And one of the things we start with is identifying emotions. And so we have them look at pictures and try to identify how that person might be feeling. We do emotion charades and have them act out certain emotions. But we also teach that good and fine are not emotions. But so many people use that. How are you today? Oh, I'm good. I'm fine. Right? But those aren't emotions. And so we need to encourage them to use emotion words, whether it's happy, sad, mad, angry, content, frustrated, surprised, and helping them build that vocabulary into their day. We also teach that they need to separate their emotions from their behaviors. So we tell them that any emotion they feel is okay, right? It's okay to feel those good emotions like happy and surprised and excited, but it's also okay to feel mad and sad and frustrated and stressed and anxious. But it's not okay to have bad behaviors when we feel those bad emotions. So that's where it comes into, we help them identify stressors, or we call them triggers in our group. So a trigger is an activity or an event that causes us to feel a certain way. And we have triggers for those good emotions and triggers for those bad emotions. We also help them figure out how their body may feel or react when they feel certain emotions like happy versus sad. And we have visuals to show you on the next few slides. And then we really try to identify strategies to manage stress and emotions. And we talk about how they need to use these strategies so their volcano doesn't erupt, right? Volcanoes erupt when the lava inside gets angry and it just explodes. And when it explodes, it causes damage and it can hurt the things around it. And so we don't want them to let their volcano explode because they can hurt those around them or hurt themselves. And so then we also help them create a plan. When, whatever their trigger is, when my brother yelling at my parents makes me stressed, I can and they can identify strategies to help them calm down. I can go into my room and listen to music, or I can ask to go for a walk, or go and just sit outside on the porch, whatever it might be. And so here are some examples of some of the resources you can find in our resource library about emotions. And so that first one is just something that many of you may have as a magnet on your refrigerator. I know I used to have one that's like, how do I feel today? And you can move the magnet around to identify how you feel. So this one is just on paper, but you can actually have 2 copies and laminate it and have each icon actually be on Velcro, and someone can be, as part of their day, select how they're feeling. We also teach that you can feel two emotions at the same time, right? I can feel really excited because of some cool event that's happening, maybe a vacation, but I could also feel really stressed about also going on vacation. And we talk about how our emotions can change throughout the day, right? We might feel happy when we wake up, and then something happens and we feel stressed, but then we calm down and we're just content. The next two visuals are just about those body changes that I was talking about. So when we feel anxious, angry, or stressed, our heart might beat faster, our face might get red, we might cry, we might want to be alone, we might breathe faster. That's the way our body is telling us that we're feeling a certain way. But the same thing with when we're feeling happy. When we're happy, we're probably smiling. Our heart doesn't beat so fast. We have calm breathing. Our muscles feel relaxed. And so that's the way we know our body's telling us that we feel happy. We have a handout on strategies to control anger. And so this is a list we've created. It's obviously not totally inclusive. There's other activities that can be done, but this helps someone brainstorm and figure out activities that they could include in their plan. Some of those strategies require equipment or certain locations. So we've also created a handout on strategies to help me calm down that doesn't require any equipment. So activities to help them with calm breathing, maybe calming their thoughts and calming their muscles. And then we try to teach about I statements, and we tell them, I tell them all the time, I have trouble using I statements, but it's something that's really important and I'm working on it. And I think you should work on it too. And I statements are a way to tell someone how we feel, and it takes away the blame. So instead of saying, you are the worst friend, I can't believe you didn't save me a seat at lunch, you are so selfish, you could say something like, I feel frustrated when you do not save me a seat at lunch because it's the only time I get to see you. Please try to sit at a table with enough room for me next time. Now, I think it'd be great if someone with Down syndrome could do all four of those steps, but most of us don't say all four of those. So even if we can get them to say, I feel when you, so they identify the emotion and the trigger, that would be awesome. The because is going to be hard because we know individuals with Down syndrome often have a hard time telling us why something's happening or why they feel a certain way. So even if it's just, I feel, stating the emotion, and when you, the trigger, and it's going to take away the blame, just a more relaxed way to tell someone how you're feeling, and it can start a conversation. We also have a video starring individuals with Down syndrome talking about stress and how their body feels when they're stressed and strategies they use to help when they feel stressed. And we have a corresponding handout with that one as well. And then we talked about making a plan, and it's really easier to teach someone what to do instead of what not to do. And I'm sure many of you have heard that in a behavior frame of reference, but it works with sharing our emotions too. We shouldn't tell them to stop feeling a certain way or stop acting out. Let's tell them what we want them to do instead. And so here are examples of some ways that you can create plans to help that individual so that you can refer them to their plan instead of telling them to stop whatever they're doing. All right. So now we're going to move on to self-care. And self-care is really important in order to have someone live a more healthy lifestyle. And there are some common challenges with that. And the first one, or maybe the most obvious one, is that they may lack the fine motor or coordination skills to complete these self-care tasks. So whether it's manipulating their fasteners like buttons or zippers or snaps or shoe tying, maybe it's opening their toothpaste container or squeezing the toothpaste container so they can get the toothpaste on the toothbrush. It could be opening food containers, pouring drinks. There's so many fine motor and coordination skills that you need in order to complete self-care. We also hear often from caregivers that it just takes too long, that you want them to be able to do these things, but you're in a rush. And so we know they can complete it, but oftentimes the caregiver just steps in to speed them along. But the thing about this is that the individual also learns that this is going to happen, that the caregiver will step in. And so they may just lack the motivation to do the task because they know someone's going to help them. They may also skip steps of a task or are not thorough with each step. So maybe they take the washcloth, they rub it on their arm, but not in a way to actually be effective to clean their body. We already mentioned this easy access to help. They just know if they wait long enough, someone's going to come in and do the task for them. And then there's sensory challenges. So sensory deficits really can make grooming and self-care tasks challenging. Common ones we hear are they don't like brushing their hair or having their hair cut or their nails cut. They don't like how lotion feels, so they don't want to wear lotion on their dry skin. Maybe they don't like getting their head wet or brushing their teeth, shaving. But even medical procedures can be considered self-care because self-care is not just hygiene. And so we hear sensory, can cause problems with going to the dentist, getting blood draws, or even using medical equipment like wearing glasses, hearing aids, and a CPAP mask. So like I said, self-care is more than just hygiene. And it can also include things like waking up with an alarm or following their daily schedule, maybe even scheduling transportation. So what I like to help families understand is that if they can just allow time and space for the individual with Down syndrome to do things on their own, this can be done on weekends or maybe at night when time is less of a pressure, right? So on the weekends, they wake up, you don't have to be anywhere. Just put them out, in their room with their clothes, see how long it takes them, and you don't have to help them. It's amazing how many times families come in and they ask me to help with a dressing task. And I just give the person this, the things to do and they do it. But it's, one, it's me, it's not their parent, right? They have no idea if I'm going to step in and help. But we often find that the individuals do have these hidden skills for their self-care. I also like to recommend working on it at nighttime. So having them work on undressing from their day clothes and putting on their pajamas at night, because undressing is usually an easier task than dressing. And you can give them a little bit more time because maybe you just start earlier to allow for that extra time. And then breaking tasks down into steps. So this is a huge part of what OTs do. We break tasks down into smaller steps. And there's forward chaining and backward chaining. That part's not really important. But sometimes we start from the end result and move backwards towards the beginning. And then other times we actually go in order and we start from the beginning and work to the end. So for instance, with buttoning is hard, and we can have them work on buttoning on a button board or buttoning on a shirt on their lap, but that's not the same as actually putting it on. So I like to have a shirt that's large enough that they can put on over their head and it's mostly buttoned, but then maybe they have to work on buttoning the last two buttons while they're wearing the shirt. And that way it's not going to be frustrating because they're not buttoning, 8 buttons and the shirt's already kind of put together. So it just makes the task a little bit easier. As OTs, we really want to look for that just right challenge. So we're challenging them enough, but not making something frustrating for them. It's really good to prepare the night before. So maybe it's laying the clothes out or having them select their clothes the night before. Maybe they make their lunch the night before, or pack their bag, just trying to eliminate some of those steps so that they can get out the door a little bit faster in the morning. We can also make modifications to increase independence. Now there's so many different adaptive clothing. Even jeggings, right? So jeggings look like jeans, but they're no fasteners. How great is that? There's adaptive clothing for all of us. Everyone's trying to make things easier for everybody else, whether or not you have a disability. So let's take advantage of that. So, pants without buttons. There's so many shoes now that you don't even have to tie, right? Maybe using a long-handled sponge to make it easier for bathing, or an electric toothbrush for thoroughness if they tolerate the sensory input of the electric toothbrush. Lots of modifications, and we have some resources, but that's always something that OTs can help with. We also want to create reminders. So we use visual supports and schedules for self-care as well, whether it's calendars, schedules, We can break the task down step by step with visuals. Visuals for self-care are really, really helpful. And then with sensory. So sensory strategies can be used to help prepare our body for a task that can be stressful. And I'm not going to go into my whole sensory spiel. Those are on plenty other webinars, but we use proprioceptive input or input into our muscles and joints to kind of help regulate our body. Because when our body is regulated, we can tolerate activities better because the messages are being sent properly from the brain to where they need to go in the body instead of just getting stuck. And so when the messages flow better, the tasks become easier. So we can use sensory strategies to help prepare our body before we have to do a task that might be a little stressful. So here again are just a few of the resources we have in our resource library. One on bathing and showering tips, just a variety of different modifications and adaptations to make that easier. We have a video on dry skin and lotion alternatives. Tips for washing and rinsing hair can also be an issue. We have, pants without fasteners, adaptive shoes, alternatives to shoe tying, a new shoe tying method. All of these resources can be found in our resource library under self-care and hygiene. So our last topic that we're going to focus on today is social skills. And why might social skills be important to address, to help us live a healthy lifestyle? One, it can really help individuals advocate for themselves. It's going to help them be successful at school or work and in the community. And it really can help them have a greater independence, meet their goals, and be safe. So all of those reasons that we talked about at the beginning. But there are some common challenges we see, and one of the reasons we run a variety of social skills groups here at the Adult Down Syndrome Center. And this has been mentioned with many of the topics today. So individuals with Down syndrome have trouble with abstract concepts, and so many social skills are abstract concepts. And, this can make learning and acting appropriately a challenge. So you can think about the phrases that they might hear at work, something like, my door is always open, right? Well, your boss doesn't actually mean their door is always open. That's just a phrase that people use. But someone with Down syndrome who thinks very literally will believe that their boss's door is always open. Or that phrase, call me anytime, right? We don't actually mean it. We're just trying to be polite. But someone with Down syndrome would take that literally. And so flexibility in thought is difficult, and that's what makes abstract concepts so hard. We also know that individuals with Down syndrome have some trouble with social filtering, right? They tell us everything. Whatever pops up into their head comes out of their mouth, right? So we know almost everything that's going on in their lives, whether it's their parents have a fight, they have an upset stomach, their brother broke their leg, whatever it might be, we usually hear it. And then often times individuals or skills, that are learned in one environment, it's hard for individuals with Down syndrome to generalize them to other environments. And we've seen this with self-care skills or maybe using alternative or augmentative communication, especially when they were kids, right? So they know maybe how to complete toilet hygiene at home, but when they're in the community and the bathroom setup's different, they may have more trouble. Because it's not the same setup, it just looks different. Or we hear that they use their communication device at school without any issue, but won't use it at home. But this also happens with social skills. And so skills really do need to be practiced in many environments. And also what is acceptable or appropriate in one social situation may not actually be appropriate in another or with a different group of people. So things that we talk to our family or our friends about, we shouldn't be talking to our boss about or a stranger, things like that. And some of that still goes with that social filtering. But again, that's very abstract. We also know that sometimes the things they say, they don't know how they appear. Like today, for instance, in group, I received in the chat box from someone, it said, move on, Katie. Like they wanted me to switch topics. Right? Or we tell them something and they're like, I got it. But with their tone might convey something different than what they actually mean. right? And so they don't intentionally say things that are inappropriate, but they can be conveyed as inappropriate by others, especially others that don't really know the individual. We also know that individuals with Down syndrome often process what they hear slower than what they see. So this can make participating in conversations challenging. It may also just appear like they're off topic in what they say, but it can really just be the delay in their processing, and that they're commenting on something from a few minutes ago. We also may see them just walk away from a conversation, maybe because it's moving too fast for them to keep up with. We find that individuals with Down syndrome often do better talking about themselves and what they know instead of asking questions of others or asking questions to learn more about a topic. And so when responding to a question, some individuals will talk about what happened on a TV show or in a movie as if it happened to them. And this kind of leads into scripted speech a little bit because it's a strategy used by individuals with Down syndrome to participate in conversations or initiate conversations more effectively. And this can lead someone who is less familiar to them to assume, because they appear to be more conversational, that they actually have more advanced skills. And then that can cause trouble, in their jobs or in their community because the expectations are higher for them and they might not be able to meet exactly what that person was expecting. For instance, we have an individual here who always asks us what we're having for dinner every night, or another individual who initiates a conversation with, "How's your mom doing?" Just because they know that that can start a conversation. We also have individuals, if we start to ask them a question, they might just respond with "good," because they think we might ask them how they're doing. And they're not even waiting to try to process what's requested of them. And then we have manipulation here in quotation marks. And it's because just like with self-care, they know that if they wait long enough, someone's going to help them. Individuals with Down syndrome are crazy smart, and they truly know how to manipulate situations in their best interest or to their advantage. And unfortunately, this can actually undermine their independence. They may gravitate towards those that will complete activities for them. We see this in school where they might want to always work with a certain aide or teacher because they might get more help. And the same thing at home. They go to that parent that's always going to do something for them or say yes or just let them have their way. So we address a variety of topics, and one is social boundaries. And we, in many of our groups, make sure that social boundaries is personal space. It's also, social filtering and what we say and who we can say it to, but it's knowing the differences of public and private. So public is when other people are around. Private is when we are alone in a room with the door closed and perhaps locked, right? We teach them that these video chats are public. It's one of our group rules. And that when our cameras are on, I can see you and you can see me. So you need to make sure that your behaviors are okay for public. And that's still, we frequently are seeing private behaviors on these video chats. And same with appropriate and inappropriate. And again, this is very abstract because what's appropriate in one setting may not be appropriate in another. But it's making it more simple where we can have public behaviors in public talk in public, but these private behaviors or this private talk or these private body parts need to be in private. We need to work on conversation skills. So asking and answering questions, staying on topic, not interrupting, active listening, the volume of our voice and the tone of our voice and our body language. We frequently say, if I'm on my phone like this, am I listening to you? Is this a distracting behavior? Things like that. And yet we still see these things. So it requires repetition and practice and using in the moment teaching, which we're going to talk about. Etiquette, we talk about, these skills that they need in order to be an adult, right? Adult, it's not just your age, it's also the way you act. And all of us need this, right? And it has to do with manners. And again, just appropriate behavior for the setting that we're in. We've stressed a lot about managing emotions, so I'm not going to get into that except to talk about social sensitivity. And so we know individuals with Down syndrome are very much aware of their immediate social environment. And so this can be really positive. So if someone's having a bad day, they usually can figure it out. They adjust their behavior. They want to give them a hug. They want to see if they're okay. That's all well and good. But they also can pick up on others' like negative or bad emotions. So if there's stress in the home or sadness or things like that, we end up seeing that reflected in an individual with Down syndrome's behavior. And if they can't manage those emotions or even know why they're feeling those emotions or communicate that, then we see a change in behavior. And so it's important to address that. We address the appropriate use of social media and phone and internet and video chats, and I talked about that a little bit. And then skills for healthy relationships. And it's not just romantic relationships, it's familial relationships, friendships. They need certain skills to be successful, whether it's conflict resolution or compromise. I mean, having someone with Down syndrome learn that they don't always get their way, that can be a hard lesson to learn. We talk about crushes and the skills you need for dating, whether it's who to date, where to find someone to date, how to plan a date, things like that. We talk about consent because that's important for all relationships, and sharing touch and affection. So we have, we talked about some of the strategies, but often these strategies to teach social skills are similar to all the strategies that we've been talking about today: modeling, practicing, visual cues, and we talked about that in the moment reinforcement, using the teachable moment. So addressing it when it happens so that they understand what they did, and then allow them to practice or role play how to do it better. Because it comes down to some behaviors are really cute when individuals are younger, but they become inappropriate as they age. So maybe it's hugging, or some behaviors may not be cute, but more appropriate for a certain chronological age. So throwing a tantrum, that's more expected of a 2-year-old, but maybe not from a 32-year-old. And so we have a variety of resources, but for sake of time, because I know there's a couple questions, I'm going to try to get through these pretty quickly. But we have rules for conversation. We have a handout on filtering. So we talk about it as a filter, but it can also be a gate, right? The gate opens and lets something out and then closes again. We have, a story about personal space, qualities of a good friend, a handout on compromise, a handout that's multiple pages on all the steps to plan a date, ingredients for a successful relationship. So this is again for any relationship, not just a romantic one. We have a video on appropriate touch and a handout that corresponds with that. We have handouts on tips for successful video calls, rules for phone safety, rules for social media. But you can also click all resources and you'll be able to see all of the variety of resources we have for social skills. And as we get ready for questions, as always, I know Laura likes to share this, but if you don't see a resource that's something that might be helpful for you, let us know, because we can always research information and create resources and put them up on our website. Or if you find a resource you think we might like, share it with us, because we post other people's resources as well. All right.
Thank you, Katie. So we have a few questions, and as Katie said, please feel free to submit any other questions you have. One is that an individual has shared that they've tried a lot of these sleep strategies, but the individual with Down syndrome just doesn't care, and he wants to stay up late. All electronics are unavailable, unlocked, and he has routine, but still doesn't want to go to bed. And he sleeps on the floor instead of in his bed. Do you have any other recommendations in that case?
I mean, that's a pretty specific question. I think that's something that we could try to address offline, not part of the webinar. I mean, it's finding out why. So giving him the choice. And again, having those activities to motivate him to want to sleep and wake up in the morning. Making sure he still wakes up at whatever time he has to wake up for the day. And if he's tired, well, that's on him. And then maybe he'll figure out that maybe I should get better sleep. It's really never comfortable for someone to be sleeping on a floor. So then finding out why he's sleeping on the floor. Why does he not want to sleep in his bed? Is it something about the sounds in his room, the feeling of the mattress? Is it cooler on the floor? I think all of those are important things to consider to figure out how we can help him get better sleep.
Thank you, Katie. We've gotten a couple questions about the slides, and we will be making those available in the next day, and I'll email those out before the recording. The recording will take a little bit longer to prepare, but I will get those slides out to everyone by tomorrow. We also had a question about adults with Down syndrome having more sleep issues as they age. This in particular was a 37-year-old. I don't know that either one of us can answer that one.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're asking what are the increase in sleep issues as someone ages,
or do adults with Down syndrome have more?
Yeah, I'm not certain that I know the answer to that either, unfortunately. I think we can all have different sleep issues as we age anyway, or as, at different stages in our life. So if they do happen to start having some sleep issues, I would recommend bringing it to a healthcare provider, because there could be some other reasons why they're having those sleep issues. So whether it's sleep apnea, or if they're on certain medication that's impacting their ability to sleep. So that I think would be a good question for a medical provider.
Thank you. Oh, do you have any suggestions to work on balance for learning to ride a bike?
That's a good question for a physical therapist. I don't. Honestly, I do know that there's some bike riding programs out there, like Lose the Training Wheels and things like that work on. So they have the training wheels on the outside, and then as the week goes on, the training wheels get smaller and smaller. So they decrease the base of support, and then eventually they might even lose the training wheels. I don't even have kids, so I've never even taught someone how to ride a bike, but yeah, physical therapists, that's who I would recommend. Unfortunately, to help with that, I apologize.
Thank you. Someone mentioned that many young adults thrive when they switch to a gluten-free diet. And why aren't there any official guidelines to inform parents of this?
Again, I feel like that's a medical question. And yeah, I feel like that's a medical question. I'm not really sure. I don't know that that's something that would even be considered for the adult healthcare guidelines. I don't know if a nutritionist has better insight into that, but I do still think that all of us are individuals. And I mean, I don't know that we can say everybody would do better if they went to a gluten-free diet. And the other thing to actually consider with that I don't know if it was mentioned before, is that I mean, everyone can choose to be gluten-free if they want, but it's recommended to try to avoid those processed gluten-free foods, those boxed gluten-free foods if you can, even like gluten-free bread and things like that, because they're just higher in calories than naturally gluten-free food. But I can tell you, I eat mostly naturally gluten-free, and that's by choice. And I do notice a difference. So I'm not disagreeing with your statement. But I don't think that's something that's just for people with Down syndrome either. So I don't know that would be something that would have to come from a doctor or dietitian as far as like an overall statement that we should all avoid gluten foods.
Thank you. And the person clarified that yes, naturally gluten-free. What strategies can we try since the pandemic has started? This individual doesn't want to participate in activities, and it's really hard to get her going daily.
Yeah, and I think the one advantage we have right now is that, when the pandemic hit, it took us all by surprise and everything just stopped. But now we have that opportunity to work on gradually making us all feel a little bit more comfortable going out into the community. So whether it's offering choices or saying, creating a schedule, we are going out, even if it's for a walk, sitting on the porch, whatever it might be, just to get out of the house for 10 minutes today. What do you want to do? And offer that choice. And just slowly building that in, but definitely giving choice is going to be helpful. But the choice is, we're leaving. Are we doing this or are we doing this? Right. And so she still might feel like she has control because she's making a choice, but not leaving isn't one of the choices. I mean, you could make it more of a behavior plan, and she gets rewards for certain things. So she gets something she wants to do if she does it. We often don't recommend rewarding with food, which often happens, but especially for individuals, I mean, we know obesity is an issue for many individuals with Down syndrome. So food should never be a reward. And then also, if you're ever using sensory strategies should never be given as a reward or removed as punishment. But perhaps trying to create a behavior plan about getting out of the house and earning, whether it's tokens to something else that she wants to do or time on the tablet or whatever it might be. But again, that's something that you could either work with us here at the Adult Down Syndrome Center, a behaviorist, but you want to work in gradual steps, and so that once everything fully opens, she's going to be more inclined to want to leave the home.
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions to motivate independence in self-care?
No. But sometimes it helps to find out what their goals are. So like, for instance, I was working with someone and he's 20 and he lives at home with his parents still, but he sees himself like living on his own and getting married and having this job and driving a car. And so, we use that as motivation. Well, if you want to be able to live on your own, you need to be able to do these things, and getting yourself dressed is one of them, or taking a shower however many days a week is one of them. And that's actually been motivating for him. So you can, perhaps use those goals. But some of it is, what would happen if you did just give them the time, right? Although I do have someone that I saw recently who, other than his mom helping him with a sponge bath for 3 weeks, he used to love baths and he hasn't gotten in the bathtub in 3 weeks. So that's a safety and health issue. But so then it's, well, what else could be going on that has changed that behavior? And so again, it could be something, talking to a medical provider if it was a sudden change in that desire, like they were doing it and now they're not. So maybe something's happened and we have to figure out what happened that has caused them to not want to do things anymore. And maybe it's individuals with Down syndrome tend to have really high self-esteem, but maybe they hate that they can't do something well. And so then we break it up into steps. So we have them do like one piece of something, and then perhaps if they become successful with that, they'll be motivated to try the next step, and just giving a lot of that positive reinforcement when they are able to do things. Maybe that could help.
Thank you. And unfortunately, we didn't get to all of the questions, but we are out of time. Please follow us on Facebook. We share quite a bit of information there, and we let people know when there are new resources in our resource library. We also have an email newsletter. We only send about 1 or 2 emails a month, but again, we give updates on what resources have been added recently, what webinars are going to be coming up, and other updates like that. And we thank you all so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at a future webinar.
Thank you.